And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska marine weather outlook for this Saturday, April 13th, 2024. We start with the sea ice on this Saturday afternoon, rather extensive, still rather far south given the pattern we've been in, some of the colder air that had allowed the ice to advance southward. Again, we find it areas of Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, and out toward St. Matthew. We are going to have a system that brings in more southeast and southerly winds across this region, so the ice will be shifting around and may actually retreat northward in some cases here. We're watching this low that'll be crossing the central Aleutians on Sunday. Weak low pressure in the northern Gulf will continue to just kind of fade off. Still a few lingering light showers or light mixed rain snow showers in the Panhandle into the day on Sunday. And then in the far north, we have a frontal system, cold front that'll be pushing across. And there's two systems to watch in the west. A low coming out of eastern Russia with this front. Increasing south winds will cause areas of snow and blowing and drifting snow. Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, all the way up along the northwest Arctic coast, western Brooks Range, especially Sunday evening into Monday and Tuesday morning. These areas could see a fair amount of blowing, drifting snow again. This low will continue tracking across the Aleutians, central Aleutians for Sunday, and by Monday the low is up just northeast of the Pribilof Islands. This low is gale to storm force winds around it, and we expect there could be some more areas of snow and blowing snow from Kuskokwim Bay, the lower Yukon Delta, and Nunavik Island by the time we get into Monday later afternoon and evening. Continuing into early Tuesday morning, that system will continue tracking northeastward. Meanwhile, this big ridge of high pressure will start to build up from the North Pacific into the Gulf, and this is going to sit in this region for much of the upcoming week, which will lead toward drier conditions, warmer temperatures, clear skies, the Panhandle, southeast Alaska. So we do expect temperatures in many areas getting back up in the 40s, even 50s here across the Panhandle, maybe even an isolated 60-degree reading. In the meantime, though, winds Sunday kind of a mixed bag, 10 knots within the inner channels, waves 2 feet. For the outer coast, westerly winds 10 to 15 knots south of Sitka, north winds Sitka off of Gustavus, 10 to 15 knots, northwest winds outside there of Yakutat Bay toward Cape Suckling. Waves swells generally 5 to 7 feet. And then on Monday, we start to see that offshore flow develop with the high starting to exert its influence there in the North Pacific and lower Gulf. North-northwest winds, inner channels 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. For the nearshore waters within the outer coast, we expect north-northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. South of Sitka, swells 7-8 feet, and then north winds variable back toward Cape Suckling and swells 4 to 6 feet. Strongest winds, western Gulf on Sunday will be here at the entrance of Cook Inlet. West winds to 35 knots, 8-9 foot swells. Northwest winds 15 knots within Prince William Sound with waves there 3 feet. Upper Cook Inlet north winds at around 10 knots with waves just a couple of feet. For Monday, though, winds really fall off along the northwestern Gulf once you get outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance and off the Kenai coast. Variable winds to 10 knots, swells just a couple few feet. Southeast winds there at the entrance of Cook Inlet to 20 knots, 4 to 5 foot swells. East winds 10 knots, 2 foot waves within Prince William Sound. Across Kodiak Island Sunday, winds will be west-northwest 25 knots, 30 knots east of Chiknik. As you drop down the peninsula and on the Bering side, we're looking at generally west-northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Waves not that impressive, 3-4 feet at best on the Bering side, a couple of feet there southwest of Chiknik on the North Pacific side. But winds increase Monday with that low lifting up past the Pribilofs and the front advancing eastward. South winds to 20 knots around Kodiak Island, but back as we get out toward the middle and lower portion of the peninsula, look for south to southeast winds, 35 to 40 knot gales, waves as high as 13 feet there south of False Pass, North Pacific, and then 6 feet there north of Cold Bay. Sunday, strongest winds are going to be rolling up through the central Aleutians as the center of the low passes between Kiska and Adak. We expect southeast to south 50 knot storm force winds especially around Atka and Adak on the south side, on the North Pacific side. And by the time we get into Monday, those strong core winds work their way across the Pribilov Islands and diminish somewhat, but still in the wake of it, we're looking at south winds to 45 knots, the eastern Aleutians around Unalaska, falling off to westerly winds around 25 to 30 knots once you get back toward Atka westward. And along the southwest coast, look for westerly winds into Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay at 15 knots, south winds 20 knots, St. Matthew, St. Paul. South-southwest winds 15 knots along the lower Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, but winds will be picking up. Where we have open water, we could see 45-knot southerly gales there in the vicinity and east of St. Paul, St. George. Look for southeast winds to 30 knots within Bristol Bay. The ice that's in place will likely want to try to shift northward a bit. Southeast gales to 45 knots there within Kuskokwim Bay, Etolan Strait. 40 knots coming out there just off of Hooper Bay, and 25-knot southeast winds Norton Sound down toward the upper portion of the Yukon Delta. And then for areas through the Bering Strait, southeast to south winds to 25 knots on Sunday. As we go up along the Chukchi winds turn southwesterly around Point Lay through Wainwright and Utqiagvik. And then look for southwest to west winds 15 to 20 knots along the Arctic coast, where some colder air will reside. High temperatures along this area, single digits above zero. Winds increase, though, especially Sunday night into Monday. We expect areas of snow and blowing snow parts of the Seward Peninsula, especially southern, western, northern areas, and then also western Brooks Range and along the Chukchi coastline. There could be near blizzard conditions at times, winds increasing 30 to 35 knots from the south in these areas, lending toward that blowing and drifting snow. So it'll be active weather through this region of the Northwest from especially Sunday night into Tuesday morning.